Okay, so have you ever, like, walked into a party and you could just tell something's off?
Yeah, like that feeling you get.
Exactly. That's kind of how I feel about the car market right now.
Oh, interesting.
How so? It's like everyone's still buying cars, but something just feels dot weird. Like, is it just me?
Not at all. Actually, that's a perfect segue into what we're diving into today, the auto market. And we've got this book, Cold War 2.0, Dawn of the Asian Millennium by Andranik Aghazarian.
Okay, and this is where things get really interesting because Aghazarian actually connects, get this, the car market to the Cold War.
It sounds crazy, but he makes a really compelling case.
Yeah, totally. So one of the things that really blew my mind was this idea that car sales peaked way back when, like, Britney Spears was still at the top of the charts.
Right, like early 2000s we're talking.
Exactly. Yeah. Aghazarian says that U.S. new car sales hit their peak back then. And get this.
Go on.
Despite a growing population, sales haven't really budged since then.
Yeah, he actually mentions that even a record year in 2016 barely beat out the year 2000. Like, more people, same number of cars sold. It's wild.
It's not like people suddenly don't need to get around, So what's the deal?
Well, Aghazarian points to the 2008 recession as a big turning point. Suddenly, that big car payment wasn't so appealing anymore.
It's like people were like, wait a minute, maybe I don't need this shiny new car after all.
Exactly. And then right around the same time, you had the rise of those ride-sharing apps. Uber, Lyft.
Game changers.
Totally. Suddenly, there were alternatives, especially for, like, younger people in cities who maybe couldn't afford a car or just hated the hassle of owning one.
Yeah, makes sense. So it's not just about the economy then.
Right. It's like a whole cultural shift is happening too. And you know what really drives this point home? Aghazarian has these incredible charts in his book.
Oh, yeah, I saw those.
One of them shows how the average age of cars on U.S. roads has been going up steadily since the 80s.
Really?
Yeah. By 2019, it hit a record 11.8 years.
11.8 years. That's like older than my laptop. Actually, that's probably older than Instagram.
I know, right? Crazy. And then there's another chart showing how the number of used cars on the road is going way up.
So it's not just like a hipster thing anymore to drive a used car.
No, not at all. It's about affordability, being practical. And don't be fooled by those car commercials with the zero down, low monthly payments deals.
Tell me about it. So tempting, but
Aghazarian calls those out as an illusion of affordability because those low payments usually just mean you're going to be paying way more in interest over the life of the loan.
Which, let's be real, is kind of a sneaky way for those lenders to take advantage.
It is definitely something to keep in mind, yeah. Especially when you consider, like Aghazarian talks about, the broader economic context, right? Stagnant wages, that whole inflation thing we keep hearing about, student loan debt, it all adds up.
For sure. All those things make it so much tougher to justify a big purchase like a new car.
Exactly. It's like trying to buy a house with spare change at this point.
Don't even get me started on the housing market. But hey, at least it's not just us Americans dealing with this, right? Yeah. This whole car thing.
You're reading Aghazarian's mind again. He actually takes us to China, which, as you know, is the world's biggest car market.
Yeah.
And even before COVID hit, get this, China saw a 9% drop in new car registrations in 2019.
Whoa. 9% in a single year. That's insane.
It is pretty wild, right? And it really mirrors what's happening in the U.S., which suggests that this whole shift away from new car ownership is a global thing.
So it sounds like we're seeing declining new car sales all over the world, a used car market that's like totally booming, and a whole generation that's realizing, hey, maybe we don't actually need to be tied to a car payment after all.
Right. It's a whole new world out there.
So where does Aghazarian say this is all headed? Like, what's the future look like for cars?
Well, he doesn't think cars are going to, like, disappear overnight or anything.
Okay, that's good, because I kind of like cars.
Me too.
Yeah.
But he does think the industry's at a crossroads, and he uses this really interesting analogy.
I love analogies. Lay it on me.
Okay, so remember when horses and buggies were, like, the way to get around?
Yeah, like in old movies and stuff.
Exactly. And then the automobile comes along.
And, well, bye-bye horses.
Exactly. He actually has this old photo in the book.
Oh, cool. What is it?
It's this street, like, packed with horse-drawn carriages, right? And then there's just this one single car just kind of puttering along.
I bet people back then were like, what is that thing?
Right. Probably thought it was some silly fad.
Little did they know.
I know, right? Aghazarian's point is that what seems radical today could be totally normal tomorrow.
So buckle up, everyone, because the future of getting around might look a lot different than what we're used to. But, like, how different are we talking? Are we all going to be zipping around in flying cars or something?
Well, maybe not flying cars just yet. But he does highlight some companies that are already adapting to these changing needs.
Right.
Well, he talks about Tesla, for example, with their electric vehicle.
Oh, yeah, Tesla. They're definitely shaking things up, but they're also, like, crazy expensive.
Yeah, they're definitely on the pricier side, which is why he also talks about companies like Tata Motors in India.
Tata Motors.
Yeah, they're huge in Asia. They've had a lot of success making these smaller, more affordable cars that are really popular there.
Makes sense, since not everyone needs or can't even fit a giant SUV.
Exactly. And Aghazarian says that's what more companies are going to have to do.
So basically, adapt or die.
Pretty much. They've got to meet the changing needs of consumers or risk becoming the next horse and buggy.
Wow. Okay, so it's not just about switching from gas to electric. It's about a whole new way of thinking about transportation.
You got it. It's bigger than just cars. I mean, think about it. Our cities, suburbs, they're practically designed around cars, right?
Yeah, you're right.
So if fewer people are driving, that's going to change everything.
That's a whole other deep dive waiting to happen right there.
Totally. Aghazarian actually gets pretty visionary in the book, talking about cities that are designed for walkability.
Ooh, walkable cities.
Well, I like the sound of that.
Right, with awesome public transportation, shared mobility options. Imagine cities with less traffic, cleaner air. It could be amazing.
It sounds awesome, but also a lot different from what we're used to. Like here in America, our cars are like part of our identity, you know?
Right, and Aghazarian gets that. But he says we need to challenge these old narratives about cars and freedom and all that, and start imagining new stories about what it means to be mobile, connected in the 21st century. So we've been talking about how the future of getting around might not involve cars as much as we're used to, but people have been saying that for years. Are things really going to be that different this time?
You know, it's funny, isn't it? Like, cars used to be this symbol of progress and all.
Yeah, like the ultimate freedom machine.
Totally. But now, it's like maybe our obsession with cars is actually holding us back.
That is kind of ironic when you think about it like that. So is Aghazarian saying we should all just ditch our cars right now and bike everywhere?
He's not saying to ditch your car tomorrow, no. It's more like he's saying we're at this turning point where we have to decide what we want the future of transportation to look like.
Okay, so bigger picture stuff.
Exactly. And he does dive into some of those specific technologies that are already starting to change the game. Like, we all know about self-driving cars.
Oh yeah, those things are always like 5 years away. Every year it's 5 years away.
Right. But Aghazarian actually makes a really good point about them. He says even though there are still some hurdles to overcome, we can't just write them off. Like, imagine the possibilities if those hurdles get cleared.
Okay, yeah, I can see that. So, like, what kind of possibilities?
Well, think about it. Safer streets, obviously, if the cars are doing the driving. Less traffic, maybe, if they can all talk to each other and avoid those phantom traffic jams.
Okay, that does sound pretty good.
And here's the big one. Cheaper transportation.
Because we don't need to pay the drivers.
Exactly.
Okay, I am starting to come around on this whole self-driving car thing.
Yeah.
But that brings up another issue, right? Like, what happens to all the people whose jobs depend on driving? Truck drivers, taxi drivers, all those folks.
You're hitting on a huge concern, and Aghazarian talks about this a lot. It's great that we have all this amazing new technology, but we have to make sure it benefits everyone, not just a select few.
So it's not real progress if it leaves a bunch of people unemployed.
Exactly. And he doesn't pretend to have all the answers, but he does throw out some ideas like, what about government investment in retraining programs? Or maybe even, and this is a little more radical, in some form of universal basic income.
Wow. Okay, that's a whole other can of worms we don't really have time to open today.
Definitely a conversation for another deep dive, but the point is, these are conversations we need to be having now as we're on the cusp of this massive technological shift.
So we can't just, like, bury our heads in the sand and hope for the best.
Exactly. We need to be proactive. We have to make our voices heard, support policies that are forward-thinking and equitable. And maybe, just maybe, start questioning all those car commercials that tell us we need a brand new car every 3 years.
It's like he's challenging everything we thought we knew about transportation.
In a good way. Because here's the exciting part. The future is not set in stone. We get to help write that story.
I like the sound of that. So for anyone listening who's like freaking out a little bit about a future without cars, what's the one thing you hope they take away from Aghazarian's book?
I would say the biggest takeaway is that we're not just along for the ride. You know, we have agency. The choices we make today will determine what that future looks like. So let's make sure they're good ones.
Well said. Aghazarian doesn't give us all the answers, but he gives us the tools to ask the right questions. And those questions, I think, can lead us to a really exciting future for transportation. One that's more efficient, more equitable, maybe even a little more fun.
That's a future I can get behind.